you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV. Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
And welcome to the Voice of AAU. My name is Hillary Boa, and I'm actually filling in for Dr. Butler. And I'm also co-hosting with the Invisible Man as well. So when Dr. Butler told me about this opportunity, I was super excited because I realized it was an opportunity to get people just like me, millennials, but also Gen Z, to the forefront of the conversation. The 2020 election, which is happening this year and it can have an amazing impact on our country alone. With that being said, I'm definitely not here by myself. I actually have 3 amazing guests. And the first guest I actually want to introduce to you guys. Hey guys. Oh, I can see everybody. Don't they look so beautiful? Wow. The first guest I do want to introduce to you guys is Miss Alex Swan. Now, Alex is actually a senior over at Spelman College, and she's actually majoring in international studies. So Alex is actually learning a mix between international things abroad, but also realizing how much that affects our national agenda as well. She also realizes that being a community advocate should be our #1 priority. So when I had her on as a guest today, I realized that this person right here is going to be a hardcore player and is going to have a hardcore voice for you guys today. Right after that, right actually below me, we actually have Miss Najma Thomas. So Najma, 2020 graduate of Spelman College. Okay. Also majored in physics, but also is doing a dual degree at Georgia Tech and also majoring in mechanical engineering. So yes, I did say physics and then I said mechanical engineering. So yes, this girl is smart, smart. Not only that, she is a member of Delta Sigma Sorority Incorporated, so she also has a ton of different community engagement. She has seen the impact of what it means to have sisters who know about political affairs, but who are also willing to do the work. And I'm so happy to have her here on today's show as well. Last but definitely not least, I have Michael Campbell Jr. Now, Michael Campbell Jr., hey, actually graduated in 2020 from University of Pacific. Congratulations in
Thank
a
you.
degree in business law. But Michael actually has some experience at Morehouse College too in political science. And the funny thing is about Michael, he's an amazing businessman. So not only does he actually have his own business as a managing partner, but it mainly focuses on realty, property management, but also to focus on your finances. Basically, we go to Michael when it's time to talk money. And he actually has seen what it means to actually be actually involved in both the economics, the political space, but also society as well. And I just want to thank you guys for all being here today. And actually, the funny thing is, each and every one of us are Gapbuster alumni. So yes, Gapbuster is all in the house.
All
We are
right.
definitely glad to be, and we are definitely glad to be here today as well. So, about the format of today's show, I personally definitely love a conversation. So, I would love if all my guests here today constantly is chiming in and engage with the audience. The same thing with those viewing at home. Please make sure to call in. A little bit later on, you're going to have a call-in number. Feel free to share your thoughts. Feel free to share your questions. Feel free to just share anything because we want to hear you. This is our platform to get our actual youth out and our actual youth out voting as well. With that being said, the first key thing I do want to define, because today's topic focuses on both millennials and Gen Z and all our thoughts about the election 2020. What exactly is a millennial and what exactly is Generation Z? So, according to Pew Research, a millennial is actually defined as a person born in 1980 all the way down to 1995. So, yes, I made the cut. We are actually going to be 39 to 25 this year. On the flip side of that, Gen Z is actually born in 1996, going all the way down to 2015. I do believe the rest of my guests actually are Gen Zers, or Zoomers, they would say. With that being said, we have just amazing thoughts for today. That's the overarching introduction. So I can kick things off with a question, but like I said, I want you guys all to chime in. So the first key question I have for you guys is, will you guys be voting in the 2020 election? Why and why not?
Sure.
Anyone
So,
can jump
of
in.
course, this year I'm going to be voting in the 2020 election. Even though it's a rather uninspiring year, it definitely is going to be a groundbreaking year in terms of being able to create change in the future. So I will definitely be voting this year to make sure we can switch around how our offices and how our leaders are currently.
Yeah, similar to Alex, I will also be taking part in the election this year through voting. I understand that in regards to the constant fight our ancestors had to go through to make voting accessible to those of the African American community, it's imperative that we take the time and vote now that it is a right that we can now exercise. So I will also be taking part in this election.
As for myself, I hate to be the bearer of difference, but I'll actually be withholding my vote, unfortunately, this year. Reason being just due to, I feel, a lack of representation and a lack of the Black agenda on the ballot.
Michael, you actually brought me to my next question. So a key thing that I like to do is actually vote based on people who actually represent my interests. What I wanted to know from you guys is, what are your interests and whether any other candidate does or does not actually align with those interests.
I'll allow the ladies to go first. If there was any one of the ladies that would have liked to pick that question up first, I definitely don't want to hog the dialogue.
No, no problem. I can go ahead and take this one to start. So I actually will be exercising my right to vote because although many of my interests are not necessarily met in this election, when it comes to reducing the police strength within this nation, as well as stronger accessibility to education, that is not necessarily met within the platforms of those running right now. But I understand that we have seen a historical trend of what had happened when we did not vote in the 2016 election and what consequences we had to face. Everything when it comes to removing the power of the Dreamers Act to defunding public education sectors. That has been seen and that has been prevalent. And unfortunately, we're facing a lot of those consequences right now within the current administration. So even though a lot of my primary interests and goals as an American citizen may not be met this time around, I still will be voting.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Najma that a lot of my primary interests aren't being represented in this year's election and they aren't being fought for in this year's election. I am voting for people who might be more marginalized than me and who this might be the difference between life and death, who gets into office next. So I just think that even if all of my interests aren't represented, being able to vote for someone who will make sure that other people are doing well and they're able to survive through the next 4 years, I think that is one of the main reasons why I'm voting.
Great. Yeah, and I'll lastly chime in to address the question in regards to the interest. And I believe that's, like I said, that's the primary reason I'm withholding my vote. I feel that as a people, specifically as a American descendant of slaves, I feel that we have come extremely far, and I totally acknowledge the importance of voting power, and I feel it's that exact reason that I'm actually withholding mine because I cherish my voting right, and being that I don't feel that my interests are met on any of the ballots. Specifically, and I wouldn't like for my dialogue to be, the overarching sentiment of the Black community, of course, by far, but just primarily speaking in regards to myself and the small cohort that I have had the ability to gauge the temperature of the room is first and foremost being reparations, monetary reparations for American descendants of slaves. Secondly, being is social justice reform, specifically in the policing power. I know for the people that I have the pleasure of surrounding myself with, and as well as some of the other close circles that I remain abreast with in the political atmosphere, as we all know, bad policing, for a lack of better terms, has been an extremely large problem, specifically in the Black community. And I feel that that's a huge, that should be on the ballot somewhere. And I think that it is somewhat on the ballot, but just as far as a more specific call to action in those 2 points, I feel that that's the exact reason that I'm going to be actually withholding my vote this year, and it pains me to do so.
Fair, and I also think it's everyone's right whether to vote or to not. And I think a really key issue, I guess, with the youth just in general is one, being involved in the social climate. Literally this week alone, Jacob Black. Again, another cycle, another point where a Black man was shot down. I'm tired of the rioting. I'm also tired of protesting. What do I expect is a leader to be who's forefront and actually trying to solve our issues. A key thing that what either Kamala Harris or Joe Biden has said in their actual plan of action is that they actually want to solve these different social justice issues. But my thing is, I think we should also talk about their history as well. So I have a question for you guys. Are you guys comfortable with today's nominations for either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party? And if so, why? If not, why not as well?
I'll go ahead and start off. I'm not comfortable with either for obvious reasons over on the Republican side, just for the more of the covert, the overt racism However, over on the more liberal side, just with Kamala Harris's background in social justice, and please don't quote me on the statistics, but her just being a pivotal figure in some of the large incarceration rates and the large disparity between people of color that were victim of, for instance, drug convictions and things of that nature for a gross amount of time compared to criminal violations. And Joe Biden also for his checkered past. Like I said, I feel that neither candidates, in my opinion, align genuinely with that of certain voices within the Black community. I do feel like they've captured portions of it, and that's great. But just certain spheres, and that may be the small cohort or group that I'm a part of, I feel that they have somewhat missed the mark on both sides, of course.
Just another sentiment to that. I would say that in regards to whether or not I'm comfortable with those who are running within the 2020 election, I don't necessarily want to use the word comfortable. I would say that at the end of the day, despite my level of comfortability, I would say that at the end of the day, I realize my responsibility as an American citizen who has the right to vote. Now, I understand that, especially in regards to Joe Biden's nomination or election of Mrs. Harris as the vice presidential candidate, has a sticky history in regards to how she has operated within the DA office. And there are cases where she advocated for lack of the death penalty in a major high criminal case against the shooting of a police officer. But then at the same time, there was policies that she had that put a lot of African Americans within jail sentences due to drug sales. So it's a complicated history. It really is. But regardless, I hope that she hears our voices. I think that the only way, unfortunately, to exercise change is either systematically or non-systematically. And I think that as citizens, we need to exercise both. Voting is a way that we can systematically exercise our voice, our want to change, especially a lot of policies that are currently in play right now. But at the same time, we also exercise systematic approaches through protests, through writing petitions. So there are a lot of ways that we can approach change within this country where our voice could and hopefully will be heard. And that's one thing that I want to, directly say to the candidates, if they ever see this, is that we want you all to hear our voices. Because I think a lot of the temperature in the room is that we might not have been the most comfortable with past decisions made, but hopefully in the future, you will hear our voices.
Yeah, and to finish off with this question, I would also say that I'm uncomfortable or unsatisfied with the political nominees, but then we have to remember that the American political system wasn't built with us in mind, and it wasn't built to hold people that are going to be working for our interests. So if we are going to be exercising our right to vote, we have to remember that the system wasn't built for us, so we can do what we can within the system, but like Najma said, a lot of our work has to be done outside of the system.
Can I jump in
I
and
completely
throw a
agree.
statistic?
Yeah.
Let me throw in a statistic. 2 million people are incarcerated in America, and that's 25% of all of the inmates in the world. As far as we are concerned, America makes up 5% of the global population, and the amount of Caucasians or white people is 58.70%, which includes Hispanics, and Native Americans are 2.30%. We actually make 40% of the prison population, and we're only 13.40% of the total population of this country. So I'd say we are mistreated by being incarcerated more so. And Najma said that it was about drugs. When the Nixon administration declared war on drugs, we were the primary targets. So
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that overarching, we do have a problem this country, and it's been seen in history, it's been seen in science, and therefore our political views have to make sure that lines up too. But it's not just our political views, but it's also our political actions. Not to mention this, but also Alex did as well. What I want to know is, how do we stay politically involved? If you're telling me I worked this hard to put a candidate in office, how do I keep that candidate accountable? Anyone
That's a
can take
good
this, by the way.
question.
Oh, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a very poignant question, and I'm not sure if I could bear the remedy for proper accountability. I think that's an extreme feat. I feel that I'm in total agreement with my fellow panelists in that it's a combined action. We have to both take action in the form of voting power and then also away from the polls. And I feel that with the proper combination of two, hopefully we'll have exactly that end result is being heard. And I feel like being how powerful the vote is. Look at how powerful the vote for Trump was. It's been extraordinary. And so I feel that harnessing such power, I feel that by withholding it, possibly maybe it could open up some eyes as well. I feel like the Democratic Party has been a bit spoiled with some of the minority population in America. I feel that it's just a given within the past 15 to 20 some odd years that anyone of color is going to just inherently vote Democratic, and I feel that it may be that exact reason that maybe there is a little bit of a lack of accountability. Maybe that is the reason that candidates can feel like we don't have to specifically represent a portion of our population, specifically the Black community, on the ballot, and we'll still gain their vote. Even without putting anything specifically for them on the ballot, we'll still get their vote just because we're a part of the Democratic Party. And so I hope, and like I said, I do not know if this would be the exact remedy. Like I said, I feel like there's some other more well-equipped, maybe PACs, some political action committees that can maybe kind of formulate a more poised formula to getting accountability from candidates. But I feel that perhaps a portion of us withholding the vote, while also a certain amount of us doing enough to maybe put a bit of a better candidate in office, maybe it'll show the candidate once again how difficult it is to secure the cherished Black vote or the minority vote, because they could miss it or they could barely get by with the skin of their teeth. And I feel that we're a huge deciding factor as far as which way that pendulum swings. And so perhaps maybe this election will, God willing, be a turning point for the Democratic Party and these candidates that we have representing the Democratic side this year.
I think even, I do agree with Michael in that, in regards to, I also do not have a remedy for how we as youth can be the most politically involved. But now more than ever, even to bring it to different medium, now more than ever, we have the power of social media as a main platform where we can spread and disseminate our concerns and our voices. And so with social media, you can start linking others to resources and to other organizations who do have a remedy of how to get a lot of the issues and concerns that you have about policies in place to larger audiences. So I think that's another medium that we can use in order to spread exactly what we see as a successful change within this country.
Yeah, I think a lot of people also aren't educated. They are able to hold their politicians accountable or to exert pressure on their platforms. So being able to educate people and let them know that they have the ability to do this and to email their representatives and to call into the offices, because all of those things are recorded by like interns in the office or whoever else is there. So letting people know that even the small things that they're doing to exert pressure on people's platforms, on their representatives' platforms, could be another way to remedy that. But of course, it's not the full picture.
Also, if you don't mind me adding really quick one more tidbit, Hillary, in response to that question, in hindsight, actually, possibly another remedy would be economic power. we see the power of lobbying. We see the power of, I mentioned an example, PACs, political action committees. The financial backing of these candidates is a very critical part of what makes it on the agenda. Oftentimes, the people that are supporting a candidate monetarily often get a point on the agenda. We see this backing from Wall Street and the huge tax benefits and other financial incentives that are carried over to Wall Street. And we can see, if we take a deep dive, how members of Wall, and I speak of that ambiguously, Wall Street, but basically the financial infrastructure of the country, how they even go to the extent of backing both parties. So whether or not it goes to the Republican Party, the American Party, or I don't know, surprisingly, the Independent Party, who knows? They will have a dog in the fight, and they'll be able to have some type of point on that agenda. However, I feel that the elephant in the room is that as a minority, we're the most economically weak in this country. So we lack the financial backing to maybe even put our dollars behind a candidate and get a solid point on the agenda. So if I could formulate, in my opinion, one of the best means of holding a candidate accountable, it sounds a bit lacking, but money is what I've seen work in the past. Political action committees, monetary support of candidates has, in my opinion, earned points on the political agenda. And so I feel that perhaps maybe if we do some form of group economics, or maybe, like I said, if we have some type of influx of economic power as the minority, and then we use that to maybe back a candidate, perhaps maybe then we could see even more of an impact when it comes time to carrying out the political agenda, perhaps.
Yeah. I do want to take a second to point out to our audience members that I also want to hear from you and do a studio call. Their number is being screenshotted on the screen a couple of seconds ago. Feel free to call in. But also, just to reiterate what all my panelists said, but I think Michael actually brought up a different point of view. America is a capitalistic country. In this country where capitalism is the number one thing, money is the power. And that is aligned exactly with our political power too. Not only do we need to be holding our candidates accountable by calling them, making sure that we are sending in our information, making sure that we are actually showing up to the table, we have to build wealth in this country to be politically active. So that's a different conversation. I do want to give a second to ask my co-host, just in case
Sure.
if he wanted to also
I had
chime
a
in
great
as well.
question in mind.
Yeah.
We have people who are politically minded. Just out of curiosity, can any of you recite the preamble to the U.S. Constitution? You remember it from your classes? No? But listen to what it says and then respond. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, my question is, you heard this, you see what's going on in the streets. Are you an American citizen? Are you receiving the rights of an American citizen? And finally, how do you feel about what happened to Mr. Floyd?
I'll allow someone else to, if they wanted to have the opportunity to.
Yeah, I can that for a second. So, thank you so much for reciting this preamble of the Constitution. Candidly, I do not have that memorized, but I should. So I'll work on that. But at the end of the day, in regards to your question about whether or not I feel as though I am a American citizen, or at least can exercise the rights of an American citizen, fortunately, no, I do not. Alex had alluded to this earlier, but again, when this country was built, we were nowhere in the conversation at all as African Americans and as slaves. We were not in the conversation when it came to voting rights. We were not in the conversation when it came to educational access. And even today, you know, a lot of people want to believe that we are in a post-racial America. We are not. When you look into a lot of neighborhoods and you see a lack of educational resource access, yes, or you see a lack of class wealth or even generational wealth, that plays into how we as African Americans within this country obtain certain opportunities. A lot of opportunities are not even given to us, or we don't even have the chance to step in a door of a workplace or professional setting. And so I feel as though still, although we want to believe that we are all equal, we all have equal rights, we're all okay, we are not. And even playing into, the scope of the pandemic now, because I think that's also an important conversation to have. We do not, I feel like the pandemic really touched on every void we had in this country, especially in the topic of racial injustices. When you look at healthcare access, that was one of the biggest voids that we have seen in regards to healthcare access, equal testing in neighborhoods, everything of that nature that we would expect to have privilege of as an American citizen, and what's within our rights, we have not seen within our as African Americans in this country. So I would say no.
Okay, thank you. Next. Same question.
I'll say that I don't feel protected under the United States. Of course, I'm technically a citizen, but if I were to have to back that up, why I feel protected by the United States or what the United States is giving me, I just wouldn't have a lot of evidence or just anything to say why I or why I feel like the United States government is fighting for me and for my wants and needs. So I don't have any of that. And I don't feel like any of the words that were said apply to me as well. Here, I look well-spoken and I can dress up nicely, but if I'm walking on the street just in normal clothes, people who are running this country, I don't look like someone who they feel is necessary to have, and they don't feel like I am someone that they should be protecting. So I think just that's really scary, and also shows me how little I'm valued in this country.
Wow. Thank you.
Beautifully said by my fellow panelists, and I 110% concur. I feel that actions speak louder than words, for a lack of better words, in that regardless of what certain amendments, the preamble, the Constitution state, I feel that the actions that the powers that be within America, we could become, we could be even more specifically with certain presidents, certain legislative members we've had in both the Senate and the House. We could speak to bureaucracies such as the police organizations, the wrongs, the injustices, we can't even count them, that have been carried out upon Blacks and other people of color in this country. And I think that it's those actions that really define our place. So they would like to think in this country, how we're viewed, how the value of life we carry in this country. However, I also like to feel, rather hopeful in that the Constitution, the preamble, those same bodies of work that created the legal framework of this country, I feel like they're living, breathing documents. As we know, that was the purpose of the amendments. They wrote the Constitution and then they amended it and amended it and amended it. And so the same things that we see as a Black community, the same thing that the world sees, this pandemic, on social media, on the news, politicians see it as well. Everyone sees it. So yeah, I feel that it's a great opportunity for our legislative members, for the legislative body, to change things. That is the reason that I feel like we elect those officials to do these things for the greater good. And so I hope and I pray that the people that we're placing in office also take heed to the same things that everyone sees and doesn't turn a blind eye, and takes that opportunity to amend things and to change things. And so that's my hope, that's my wish. And I hope I was able to sufficiently answer that question.
Okay, how about George Floyd's murder? Address that very quickly.
Go ahead.
I was going to say we actually have a caller in right now. So I did want to give someone else a chance to speak. Feel free to go in and ask your question or share your thoughts. And please say
Okay.
your name
Hi,
and where
my
you're
name is
from as
Deborah.
well.
I'm actually calling from New York. I'm actually really excited because I wanted to hear young people and what they had to say about the election. I actually have two questions. So my first question is just about how did you get introduced into the idea of voting and what are some ways people can register to vote? And my second question is really general towards everyone, not really towards one person, even though it might seem like it. If you do refrain from voting at this election, do you feel like people have the right to talk about the outcome and whether or not whoever's in office, or do you feel like someone has the right to talk bad or good about the person who gets elected to be in office this term or not? So those are my two questions.
Great.
I'll definitely allow someone else better equipped to answer the first question in regards to different ways to get involved voting. I'm not too abreast with all the numerous ways you can cast your ballot.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, thank you so much for calling in. So, in regards to the first question where you asked, how did we get involved with voting? I actually come from a line of family members who have always exercised their right to vote. And they were always advocates of going to the polls, making sure that your voice is heard, because at the end of the day, we're not really only voting for president or vice president. We're voting for attorney general, we're voting for secretary of state. We're voting for, different policies to be put in place that may align more with our ideal situation. So I have always been an advocate of voting, but that also does come from having familial members who have also exercised that right. In regards to your second question, which was ways to register to vote, I am not the most equipped to answer that, but I know that a lot of times I've actually seen a lot of resources posted at my school in regards to how to register to vote. Sometimes we have actually students standing outside with documents in their hands, allowing others to register to vote. I know I did mine online, but there's a lot of different platforms. Unfortunately, I'm not the most equipped to answer that, but I can also send you to some resources to learn about more opportunities to register to vote. And then your last question, please repeat your last question again, I'm sorry.
Still there?
I didn't quite catch the last question.
I think the last question actually talked more about for people who actually abstain from voting, do they actually have an actual voice on the outcome of the actual election?
Oh, yes, that's right. Okay, thank you so much, Hillary, for repeating that. I feel as though with that one, in regards to withholding a vote within this election, I feel like sometimes I wouldn't say that they should not continue to speak up about what they believe in. At the end of the day, it is a personal choice in regards to whether or not you want to vote. And I don't feel like that takes away your right to speak up about a certain issue. But I also do want to express to, others viewing this show that this is at least a right now way that we can exercise our voice. That, like a systematic way that we can express our desire for change. And so that's the responsibility that I want others to understand. And I want to also understand the power that we have with our vote. We saw in the last election that even though the popular vote was won by a Democratic candidate, it still didn't work in depending on how you politically align, the Democratic favor because of a couple of states and the Electoral College. But at the end of the day, we saw within that election in 2016 that is imperative to vote because every vote really does count. So that's what I would say to answer that question. I hope I touched on all the topics or components of that question. But I'll definitely let my other panel members also speak up about it.
Go ahead, Alexis.
Sure.
Sorry.
I grew up in a family that does a lot of political education and education about our history. So I've always, pretty much since I was really little, understood the sacrifices that my ancestors have made so that I have the right to vote. So I always had planned on voting and exercising my political power that way. And then in the 2018 gubernatorial election down in Atlanta, when it was Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp, I registered to vote in Georgia, and my voter registration was purged from the voter rolls. So I wasn't able to vote in that election. And also, the polls at Morehouse broke, which is where a lot of the people from Solon and Morehouse who would be voting for Stacey Abrams would have been voting. So there was a lot of voter suppression surrounding that election, and that was when I really saw the state of the United States political system firsthand. And I decided that I needed to get involved further in being able to help other people register to vote and help people exercise their right. And then in regards to your last question, I think that if people aren't going to be voting, they obviously have the choice to speak about however they want, free speech, but I hope that they're doing something else or helping organize in a different way so that we're moving forward, even if they aren't using their right to vote.
Very well put. It's amazing. I wasn't even aware of some of the forms of voter suppression that were taking place in one of my previous institutions in these sisters over at Spelman. I'll say that similar to my fellow panelists, I had the pleasure of accompanying my mother, my great-grandmother, to the voting polls. I remember vividly voting for President Obama, or going along with my mother to vote for President Obama. It was definitely a pleasure. I'm also familiar with mail-in ballots. I think that a large majority of people are casting a mail-in ballot this year. And so those are two of the specific ways that I'm familiar with getting involved with voting. I do believe there are other ways that you could take advantage of casting your ballot. To address your second question, and I would say that I definitely feel that there's a potential, there's room for a voice for those that don't cast a ballot. However, as being someone who is withholding my vote, I feel that for those who are also doing the same, it's extremely important to be abreast with the possible consequences of doing so. And if you are going to go that route of trying to stimulate change, specifically speaking towards withholding your vote, be aware of what could be the possible casualty of doing so. And so, just speaking personally as someone who's withholding my vote, I think that unfortunately that with the current political climate, in my personal opinion, and also I'm only speaking, sharing the sentiments of those of small cohorts that I also align with, is that we feel that there's a lack of hope on either side. I feel that whichever way, once again, whichever way the pendulum swings, whether it's we have another term with President Trump, or we have, we return office to the Democratic Party, the specific things for the Black interests, specifically being reparations and also some type of reform in policing of Black communities, I don't feel that either party is going to carry out any specific calculated agenda to remedy either of those things. I have little to no hope that President Trump is going to stimulate conversation revolving around reparations, and I have not yet heard it specifically put on the agenda from potential President Biden or his accompanying running partner, Kamala Harris, as far as we intend to stimulate reparations for American descendants of slaves. I haven't heard that yet. And so
I completely agree as well. I feel like we have so many different interests that have really yet to be said by any candidate. But guess what, guys? We have a bunch of calls as well coming up on the line. So, so the next range of calls, I'm going to ask only one panelist to answer the question. But please keep on going, keep it being engaged. So I'm going to open up the next caller. Please say your name and what state/city you are from.
Right now?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Jake. I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland. And I was wondering, outside of voting, what are other ways I can get my voice out there and heard and my opinions to be addressed?
Great question.
Hey, Jake, thank you so much for asking that question. I think that especially being a young member, trying to also get more politically involved, some of the ways that I personally used to get politically involved is participating in demonstrations. I also believe that signing petitions and also calling your state senator is another good way to get involved. Now, in regards to other ways, I can also link you to more resources, because there's a lot of what I've seen, especially on social media platforms, is that now a lot of youth members are posting organizations who help youth get more involved politically. So especially when you look at Black Lives Matter, when you look at National Council of Negro Women, any of those major organizations have really good platforms to help youth members get involved. So that's what I would answer your question to.
Thank you so much, Jake. And I believe we have another caller on the line as well. Feel free to say your name and then please say your city / your state and ask your question. Nope, guess not. With that being said, is there any other key points that you think our people should walk away from today? Oh, actually, I did remember one more thing. So on an earlier question, someone asked, how exactly can I register to vote? A really simple, easy way is by going to myvote.com. That's where you can actually register to vote within your state. And then they will feel free to actually send you over a ballot. Feel free to actually use your voice / your actually right to vote as well. Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to turn it back over to the actual panelists as well, because I think earlier what Alex, or maybe it was Najma, actually mentioned how things were really important on the ballot, not just a presidential candidate, but actually the rest of the things that we have to vote for in terms of policies and in terms of actual other people on the ballot as well. I want to know, how do you guys actually research the information or the possible candidates on a ballot before you actually come to the actual voting ballot?
I definitely try to do a lot of research before I end up voting. Sometimes organizations that I'm part of or that I follow, like the NAACP or other types of organizations, so like the local Montgomery County chapters of organizations might release voter guides. And so these voter guides have information on the specific candidates that are running in my area. And I'll be able to read about their policies and their platforms and be able to choose who out of that list of candidates is doing really well and who's fighting for what I believe in. So I would definitely suggest that you look up local voter guides or national voter guides. We have big websites who, like Political, will do a side-by-side comparison of candidates. So you can look there for specific positions on specific issues.
Exactly, Alex. I 100% agree in regards to the methods that you use to learn more about the potential candidates. Also, another, just to add on to that perspective, another way that I also tend to look at the policies of a local candidate or national candidate would be from other nonprofit organizations who tend to have ideals that align with myself, such as Dr. Butler Yaboa with the Gapbusters Leaders in Training. I tend to look to her as a guide in regards to learning more about the policies of candidates, in addition to my own personal research.
Great resources there for my other panelists. I also take some of the same methods of, being well informed going into election season. I try to tune into all the national conventions, some of the political debates. I feel that oftentimes candidates voice some of their larger points on those platforms. I also do try to align myself with lesser public figures that, once again, align with my interests. Specifically, one that I've been following closely is Yvette Cornell, who has been one of the figureheads of the ADOS movement. I believe she was recently also featured on CNN, and I think that people such as Yvette Cornell and also those other opportunities to see your candidate on a public platform, they're great ways to just inform yourself on who actually you're voting for, and to ensure that they're actually a candidate that's going to carry out your best interests.
Awesome. And guess what, guys? We have another caller. So, caller, feel free to say your name, but also where you're from, and then say your question.
Okay. My name
Go
is
ahead.
Avia, and I'm calling from College Park, Maryland. And I'd like to ask if you guys see voting as an individual moral choice or as a strategic and impersonal tool. And I'd like to hear you guys defend your position and talk about that a bit. And I'd also like to ask if you guys think it's more strategic to work in or outside of the system right now, if establishment institutions aren't made for us. And if that's the case, what kind of counter institutions should we work on building and supporting? Thanks.
Well, guys, anyone can take that question. That was a three-part question.
That was a lengthy one. I would to answer the. Go ahead, Hillary. Apologies.
Oh
I'm
no,
sorry.
I can start, but feel free to go on too.
Oh, I thought that was that Najma. Were you about to speak, Najma?
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead first. You're fine. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I'll try to be as precise with my answer as well. It was a bit lengthy, but to answer your first one, I would say that it's more of a strategic play. I feel that the overarching sentiment is that it's a individual right or a civic duty per se, but I definitely think that political power is a very strategic play. To answer the second question, as far as institutional and non-institutional organizations, if I'm not mistaken, the question was more so whether you're supporting a formal institution or whether it's kind of curating your own non-formal institution. I would say that if there isn't a formal institution that specifically aligns with what it is your political aspiration is, or what you're attempting to get out of the political party or the candidate specifically, I do feel that it's more beneficial to whether it be forming or joining a more non-formal institution that specifically speaks towards what it is that you're trying to achieve. I feel that, and it's through those outlets that a birth of another party, a birth of another voice can come about if it's not necessarily present on a larger platform. I hope I was able to answer it as specifically as possible.
I think you actually did a great job. Oh,
Go ahead. I was just in agreement with Michael in regards to forming your organization if you feel as though there's a void in the nationally formed organizations. Because with anything in this country, we've seen that major policies have been implemented from smaller voices being spoken, I guess. That's for lack of better words. When it comes to women's suffrage, when it comes to racial equality, those started on smaller platforms, but then eventually gained more traction and became larger scale. So I feel as though definitely if there's a void, start your own. Find a platform in which you can speak, in which your voice can be heard. Or maybe pitch an idea to a nationally formed organization. And then also in regards to your other question, whether or not voting is a personal right or is more of a strategy, I feel as though it's both. I feel like even though we vote on the basis of our own environmental situation, at the end of the day, voting and who we vote for affects a lot more than just ourselves. And I think someone had alluded to earlier in regards to, for those who do happen to withhold their vote, which is fine because it is a personal action and personal choice, we are voting for a lot more than just ourselves. Like, we're voting for, at least if you choose to vote on the Democratic ballot, if you choose to align with the Democratic ticket, you're voting for more access to health insurance. You're voting for more exposure and more funding for environmental protection agencies. So you're voting for a lot more than just yourself, even though it might not directly affect your own personal situation. So I hope I answered that question, but that is definitely my take on the question that you had asked.
Awesome. I also want to give space just in case, Alex, did you have anything you want to mention as well?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that voting is a strategic decision. I think I mentioned this a little bit before, but when I vote, I'm not just thinking about myself. I'm thinking about people who may be more marginalized than me or who don't have access to vote. So people who are felons and they're not able to vote in the election. But one specific example is Donald Trump's executive order to not allow trans people to come into homeless shelters. And so that is a direct attack on people's livelihood and their ability to survive, especially since we know that a lot of LGBTQ and trans people are the ones who are, they have high rates of homelessness. So when I'm voting, I'm thinking about making sure that things like that won't happen from our presidential candidates or from our current president. And so that's why I believe voting is a strategic decision, because I'm voting for not only myself, but to make sure that if the most marginalized among us are free, then all of us will end up being free. But with that being said, I believe that we have to work outside the system to create the change that we want to see. Obviously, working within the system hasn't been working. We've only been able to find Band-Aid solutions, which I think is okay in the meantime until we have our new political party or until we figure out how we're going to go about restructuring our entire system so that it works for everyone. And I think part of the way that we could do that is by coalition building. So using our resources together and working with people who are doing the same things as us to be able to strategize. I like Najma's idea of like starting your own thing when it comes up, but there are people who are doing the work who might need just a little bit more money or a little bit more platform that we can work together with to be able to create the change that we want to see.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with all you guys, especially Alex's point. I think that so many of us want to lead, but not all of us are leaders, right? So you might have a type of idea, you might have a type of opinion, right? But there are so many different other people who also have that idea. To be strategic is to vote, right? But to be strategic in a time where you constantly see your vote doesn't matter means that you have to figure out a different way as well. As said, there are plenty of other people. Just double check social media, double check Google. Just Google it and see the amount of people. Like you could use your strength. So with, for example, since Michael's great at economics, funding would be his key part for that. Different people. I'm great at marketing. I know how to share people's voices to the entire world. I could be that person for that group. Najma's great at science. She could tell you in a scientific manner how you are wrong, and you cannot fight her because she is always right. And Alex understands the international voice. So all of us, all our trends and what we put together can also add to actually counteract what the current issues also are as well. So I also have one last question. I did want to ask you guys that was honestly asked by a couple different people to ask you guys as well. I want to know, do you think it is important for the youth to vote in the 2020 election? Now, when I say youth, I'm talking about us as a broad spectrum of people around the entire actual nation. Or do you think that we should just take a step back and maybe think about either these counter institutions or just abstaining our voice or our vote before until we actually have our needs actually met?
Sure. So to start, to answer your question, Hillary, I personally believe that it is imperative that those within our generation go out to vote, because we've seen that we, as a Gen Z, millennium, whatever the term to describe our generation is, we've seen that we do have voting power. And we have seen that we can really change the output of elections. Now, that does not negate the fact that we should also not be involved with other organizations that align with our political ideas. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't participate within demonstrations or petitions or calling our senators. But I do believe that we should vote, because at the end of the day, voting only takes, depending, of course, if you're not suppressed, unfortunately, voting should only take a couple of minutes. And so I feel like we need to vote. That's my personal opinion on that.
Definitely. I'd say to answer that question, Hillary, is that I'm more of an advocate of do something of change. I feel that the purpose, the intention that I always had, the one time that I was able to vote and the times that I've accompanied family members is to incite change. And so, as being someone who's withholding my vote, I'm not a fan of posing potential problems without at least attempting to pose a potential solution. And so, whether you're voting or you're withholding your vote, my recommendation would be do something to catalyze change. So, for instance, to be more specific, I may be withholding my vote, but rather than just withholding my vote and maybe just speaking negatively towards what it is we have to offer as far as candidates, potentially I can stimulate change in another way. I specialize in finance, and I feel that economic empowerment and financial literacy, it's a crux of this nation. And so if I could do anything I can to enlighten the people that are maybe lacking in financial literacy, or do anything I can to empower people in that form of fashion, I attempt to do so because I feel that that could possibly stimulate change. And so whether it be you're stimulating change through your vote or stimulating change through an alternative method, that would be my recommendation, is just to do something of change rather than to remain satisfied with the status quo, or just to remain, I would say, I don't know, to remain indifferent in a matter this important.
I would say to young people that I would really urge all of us to use our voices to vote. We have to remember that people died to get us this right, so it would be grateful of us to use it. And I definitely understand where Michael's coming from. And of course, like, I feel conflicted when I'm telling people to vote because of a lot of the barriers that are here for Black and Brown people when we're working on thinking about systematic change and issues in our democracy. So I won't specifically tell people you have to vote, but I think that it's really important to use this right that was given to us and that people have fought so hard for in the past.
I got one. E pluribus unum, out of many, one nation. Do we as a people actually fit that profile? Will we ever fit that profile? And do you see self-determination in our future as a people here in America or outside of America?
Someone else want to pick that one up to close out?
You want me to repeat?
Oh,
To repeat?
Oh, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
You say now, do you feel that, do I feel that there's hope for us as a people in this nation or elsewhere?
Yeah, e pluribus unum is out of many, one. And since we've been here, we have not fit in. We will never fit in. That's my position. And what about self-determination? And we got 1 minute.
I think I will actually answer that question to end the show. I think this actually wraps everything up together. At the end of the day, we are currently in America, and therefore you must understand how America works. Not only are we a capitalist country, we are also a political power. So not only do you need to vote, in my opinion, I think we also need to up our economic spend. I also think we have to be involved socially. Out of one, many can happen. Out of many, one can happen. I agree with that. But it's up to you to start that. My name is Filiboa, and I'm so grateful for all my panelists today and for my co-host, The Invisible Man. You guys made this show a rewarding experience. You actually got to spot the youth. So with that being said,
And
I
Afrique
will end the
Today,
show.
remember?
And Afrique Today. Afrique Today. Thank you, Afrique Today, for actually having us on your network. And if any of you guys have any shows that you want to talk with the youth or even the general public about, please let the director of Afrique Today know, or even text me. I don't mind. And with that being said, I'm going to close out the show. Thank you guys all for being here, and thank you guys all for having us. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.